All right, welcome everybody. So let's get rock and roll here. Welcome to Essential Soft Skills in Project Management. I am Hope Yamada. I am from the Chula Vista Elementary School District. And with me today, I have Craig Leach from the Cardiff School District and Nancy Baum from the San Diego County Office of Ed. So let's jump right in. So what do you think of when you think of soft skills? If you would be so kind as to put some responses in the chat. Let's hope that our chat is working. I don't see any responses yet. Thank you. Empathy, yes, yes. Thank you, Kathy. People skills, thank you. Collaborative, I like that. Denise, thank you. Oh, how stakeholders feeling? Communication, flexibility, I like it. Social skills, like it. We're gonna see a little video there in a real quick. Interpersonal skills, yeah. Relating to others, good. End users, yep. Walking in their shoes, absolutely. Thank you all. Those are perfect. And a perfect segue. Oh, time management, beautiful. Yes, absolutely. Leadership. Okay, so we will actually be talking about 3 of those items this morning. But first, Craig gave us this great video on a soft skills non-example. So let me play this for you, and let's give me a thumbs up if it works, if you can hear the sound.
Hello, IT? Have you tried turning it off and on again? Oh, okay, well, the button on the side, is it glowing? Yeah, you need to turn it on. The button turns it on? Yeah. You do know how a button works, don't you? No, not on clothes.
Hello, IT? Yeah. Have you tried forcing an unexpected reboot?
No, there you go. No, there you go. I just heard it come on. No, that's the music you hear when it comes on. No, that's the music you hear when... I'm sorry, are you from the past?
You see, the driver hooks a function by patching the system call table, so it's not safe to unload it unless another thread's about to jump in there and do its stuff, and you don't want to end up in the middle of invalid memory. Hello?
Oh, really? Well, why don't you come down here and make me then? Huh? What, you think I'm afraid of you? I'm not afraid of you. You can come down here any time and I'll be waiting for you. I told her. Oh, God, it's about time you got back. It's been all go.
You had a job?
Girl on 5th.
Did you and her hit it off?
Define hit it off.
Did she continue talking to you once you'd fixed her computer?
No.
So at the bottom of the next slide, so we may or may not have time for questions, like where did Craig get that? But but we will leave the time. We have a separate Padlet, which will be on the bottom of the next slide that you can click on. So if we have time for questions, we'll take some at the end, but if we don't, then you can use that avenue. Communication, so that's exactly how not to communicate, right? But unfortunately, we've probably all had that interaction, unfortunately. So we're going to try not to do that, right? We're going to try to learn how to communicate a little better. So, but we want to speak in terms of communicating about our projects. So why don't we communicate about our projects? What are some reasons why we would not want to communicate about our projects? Put those in the chat if you would. Yes, not all IT is like this. Yes, some do have people because we're too busy. Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Craig. Things are delayed. Yeah. don't know the scope. Things are not going to plan. Yes, we're going to talk about it. A good example of that. Running behind schedule. Yep. So time. Don't want to. I like that. Don't want to commit. Right. We don't want to overcommit. Too much information to communicate. Nice. They ask too many questions. So we're going to talk about tools so that we can kind of head some of that off. Good. Haven't started yet. Okay. Users try it, and here come the questions. There you go. Not sure who the stakeholders are. Okay. Sometimes we forget who all the stakeholders are. Don't want scope creep. Yep. All great, great things. Awesome. Thank you so much. So there was a project recently, a very big project, and Nancy knows probably exactly what one I'm talking about here, where sometimes we don't communicate because I think out of fear, right? Things are not going, somebody mentioned not going according to plan. And so we really are afraid to communicate out what's going on. So in this case, this very large project did not go well, hasn't gone well, is still having issues. And so guess what? The users want to be communicated with. Right? So they started posting and they're venting their frustration. And so they had quotes like, that's the problem, lack of communication. Don't tell me the flash and a few videos equate to the same thing. That's not communicating the needs of today. At this time, so-and-so or anyone needs to communicate. What's the best course of action? I'm checking my emails. I do not see any guidance from anyone about what to do or what not to do at this time. I honestly don't want to use the system right now. I feel like something needs fixed, and then I'll have to go back and check a million times. Lack of trust in a system is never good. And I would say not only not lack of trust, what's worse is that not only do they not trust the system, now they don't trust you as the project manager, as the team. And so we really do want to communicate with our users. So it got so bad in this case that they started giving their own suggestions on how they wanted to be communicated with. So they made suggestions like maybe there's a system status console page somewhere that could tell us how things are going and with the various systems, because this system impacted a lot of other systems. That would be rather handy. System X status up, numerous issues being addressed, modules for student programs, et cetera, yet to be implemented. System Y status up, current feed from this system is suspended due to data integrity concerns. We expect it to resume, and put the date you think it might resume. That may change. Let them know that. System bridge status up, no known issues. Hallelujah on that one. Right? So my point being, even if it's bad news, because a lot of times we don't want to communicate because maybe it is bad news, people still want to know what's going on. Right? And so in this case, they did listen to their users, and they started going from, they used to have a weekly Q&A, and now they have 3 times a week. They started doing meetings, and they brought in, finally, after this was such a huge problem, they brought in management level folks to apologize. They started owning it, say, we get it, we're hearing you, this did not go well. Okay, and users appreciated that. Okay, they now felt listened and heard to, and then they could deal with the issues much better. Okay, and I bet you anything, Nancy in her next presentation will kind of address this. So they started giving a known issues list. I think, I haven't looked at it recently, it was 300 items, but at least it was something, so that, guess what? It took away a lot of the emails, right? And a lot of the tickets. So like you said, somebody mentioned, oh, if we communicate, then we're going to start getting all these emails. But if you communicate, by the same token, you may not get all the emails because you've told them what's going on. Okay, and you've told them how to address it. So they're not going to send you an email about a problem that's already on the list because they know you're taking care of it and you've given them a status. Okay, so speaking of statuses, they started doing weekly status reports now for this project to let people know what's working, what's not, what's going on, what do they anticipate fixing and when. Okay, again, communication. I don't know if I can recommend this book, but my son actually gave this to me because of emails. And I know a lot of us spend a lot of time in emails, like hours a day, right? Just plowing through our emails. But if we use some of the tools that were given today, some of that will go away. Okay, so this book, my son liked it because not only did he talk about the problem with email as a technology, but also the solutions. So I'm looking forward to possibly reading that over a 3-day holiday weekend coming up. So the tools that you've been given for communication to help us in this process are in the planning stages. You're given the project charter, which is a great just first started document. If you do anything else, depending on the size, no, like I said, if it's a little tiny project, no. Do you need a project charter? Probably not. But if it's a decent sized project, you should have a project charter. A file repository. That way they're not asking, what happened at that meeting? What happened at that status? Where's the status report? It's all there. You have it. Everything's in the file repository. They can go straight there and find it, what they need. Regular meetings. I know that's not something we like. Someone mentioned in the call, one of the sessions yesterday, that their boss had a stand-up meeting, and it literally meant stand up so that they could keep it short, right? When we're sitting down, we tend to, stay a little longer, but it's a stand up. Let's go around the room, whip around the room. What's going on? Okay, let's go. Move on. Weekly status reports, another good plan. Again, if it's that longer term project, or biweekly, I think the guy from Fallbrook mentioned, Kirby mentioned this morning that they did, I think it was biweekly. So again, depending on the project. And then please, please, please don't forget these last two, the final reports, okay? Give it that closure, right? A lot of times we've talked about this in other sessions, we're just like on that hamster spinning wheel going from one to the next, to the next, to the next. And we don't stop and close out that project. And a lot of times this helps that scope creep. So we let people know, okay, we finished this project, but guess what? In our final report, we know that we have these outstanding issues. We're going to address those, but that's going to be in the next project. And then do a survey. We did our first survey. And the other thing about this is, again, your users then feel heard. So again, even if it didn't go well, one of the comments was, thank you for doing this. We feel heard. We feel like you're listening to us. You're listening to our concerns. We appreciate that. So again, that's the end of my session. If you do have any questions or comments, please feel free to go to our Padlet. And Kathy, thank you. Surveys can provide lessons learned too. And as a friend of mine's wise mother once said, wherever you have two or more people, you have problems. So when we communicate, we're bound to have issues and problems. And so Nancy is going to be our next presenter and present on conflict management. So thank you. Take it away, Nancy.
Okay, can you hear me? All right, good, thank you. So I'm going to be talking to you today about conflict resolution. We've all experienced conflict in the workplace. Sometimes we experience it directly. Sometimes we have our team or our peers are providing or having conflict. So I want you to put in the chat just what are some common causes of conflict, and I'll give you an example. Different priorities that can cause it. And any ideas on what are some other things that cause conflict in the chat? Misunderstandings. Yeah, that's a big one. Different visions. That's a great one. Yeah, a lot of misunderstanding. Communication, stress. That's big. And it could be stress from home or stress from work. Doesn't matter. Out of scope. Very different definitions. Scope creep, that's a big one. Different opinions. That's absolutely right. So there are a whole lot of different reasons why conflict might come up in the workplace. So today we're going to focus on conflict resolution. And we're going to do that by looking at the Thomas Kilmann conflict model. And we got this from Infotech Research Group, which we get a lot of our research information from. And this particular model talks about 5 general approaches to resolving conflict. And some of those approaches, you can look on the left side, attend to more to your wants and needs. And that would be the shark, which is compete, force, I win, you lose, or the avoiding turtle. If we just don't face it, it'll go away. Some of the approaches go more towards their wants and needs, which is the teddy bear, the accommodating teddy bear, which is I lose, you win. And then the other 2 approaches are sort of a balance between the 2. We've got the collaborating owl, which is I win and you win, and the compromising fox, which is I win a little and you win a little. So it's important to know that we're capable of all 5 approaches and we all use them at one time or another, but we probably have 1 or 2 that are more of our go-to. And it seems like some of these styles would be bad, but in reality, they all have appropriate times where they can be used. So I'll give you an example. I was running in a half marathon and I was about a quarter mile away from the finish line, and I heard this big thud behind me, and I turn around and this poor gentleman was unconscious on the ground. The thud was his head hitting the pavement. He wasn't breathing, he was turning blue, and in fact he was having a heart attack. And so I ran over there and a couple of other people ran over there, and the guy that got there first, he pointed to another guy that got there and said, "You call 911." And he pointed to me and he said, "You grab his phone, see if you can get into it and find an emergency contact." And then he knelt down and he started CPR. And right then the EMTs got there because the medical tent was just a little bit away. So in that case, it was a medical emergency. It was literally life and death. It was not the time to say, okay, now I know in this instance, CPR is good. Does anybody else want to talk about any other solutions we might want to try? And who would like to do which task, right? That's not the time for collaboration. That was the time for very quick, very decisive action and leadership. So if you take that to work, if you have a medical emergency, safety emergency, cybersecurity or security emergency, those are times where you need quick, decisive leadership. So competing forcing shark, which is sort of a my way or the highway type of style. But in that particular case, it works. It's effective. It gets things done very, very quickly. But it's not one that you want to make your go-to, right? It's not one that you want to do all the time because it doesn't build a lot of morale. Um, but it is very, very useful in those kinds of situations. On the opposite end of the spectrum, you have avoiding turtle. So that's where, oh, we're just not going to deal with it. Where it is effective is when you table something for a short time so that you can address it in a short while more effectively. So imagine we're all at a meeting and we're all around the table and an issue comes up that will affect our students with disabilities. And it just so happens that none of us around the table are special education experts. So it is very appropriate to say, I'm going to table this agenda item. Next week at our team meeting, we're going to bring in our SELPA executive director. SELPA is Special Ed Local Planning Area. This is our monitoring authority for special ed. So this is an expert who will come in and guide our conversation. That's a very appropriate use of avoiding turtle. So another appropriate use is if you have something where maybe the meeting's gone long, no one's eaten lunch, and people are starting to get hot under the collar and emotional. Then it's very appropriate to say, you know what, we're going to table it. We're going to meet at 2 o'clock after lunch, maybe in a different room, and then we'll address it again there. And just give people a chance to calm down, maybe go eat, get a little bit of a new perspective, and then try again. So avoiding turtle works if you're avoiding for a short time in order to effectively address it in the near future. Does that make sense? So the other use of it can be if you have no chance of satisfying your concern. In that case, you might want to pick your battles. I mean, it's just sort of the what hill do I want to die on. So there's some times where you just want to avoid it just because it's just not worth the effort. But that again should be sparingly. Sometimes it's appropriate, but that shouldn't be the rule. So if you're a type of person who really hates conflict and avoiding turtle tends to be your go-to, the problem with that is when you address conflict when it starts, it tends to be smaller. If you just hope it goes away, it tends to grow and fester, and then it becomes much more difficult, much messier to try and resolve. The next one's accommodating teddy bear. This is when I give in. I'm going to let you have your way. This is good when you find out you're wrong. So I've been to a meeting where I come in thinking one thing and then I learn something new in that meeting that makes me reassess. So I didn't know that that product was going to have that long of a lead time. That's going to blow our schedule out of the water. Or, gee, I didn't realize they had changed that legislation. And so in those cases, it's okay to defer to someone who has a better idea. It's okay to learn things new. You don't always have to be right or don't always have to have your way to go. So keep an open mind to what you're hearing and learn from what's being said. It's also good if something is far more important to the other person than it is to you, then actually being accommodating teddy bear builds relationships. It can keep harmony as long as it's not always one-sided, right? So that works in marriage too. So my husband and I do that all the time. If something's much more important to him than to me, I let him have it and vice versa. And fortunately for us, it's very balanced, so it works. I like the last one, which is to allow people an opportunity to develop by learning from mistakes. So if you're a manager and you have a staff member, you're trying to develop their skills and they want to try a solution that you have doubts about, but the earth isn't going to fall apart, let them try it. And then be there to coach and guide them if it doesn't work. And you may even learn something because maybe they'll take a different approach and it will work. So that's accommodating teddy bear. Collaborating owl. This is the I win, you win. This is when we all get together and put our insights together and everyone gets their concerns heard and then you come up together with a solution. That is obviously a great go-to. The only downside to collaborating owl is it takes time and sometimes you don't have that kind of time. So in that case, compromising fox is another good one. So that's when I win a little, you win a little. So I give a little bit here, you give a little bit there. Neither of us get all that we want, but we both get some of what we want and everybody gets something that they can live with. The only thing about that is you want to make sure that the solution you come up with has everyone's buy-in. So tips for a successful conflict resolution: when you decide that force and avoid are not appropriate for a situation, which should be most of the time, right? Because you're not going to use force and avoid very often. You use those sparingly. Then you're going to use compromise, collaborate, or accommodate, or some combination of those. And the way you do that always is to start by listening. For all three of those approaches, you start by listening and you listen to understand. So, one way to do that, which is really, really effective, is to have each party describe the conflict in their view and then have one of the other parties paraphrase what they said. So, paraphrase means just repeat back what they said in different words. You will be amazed at how many times when you paraphrase someone, what you thought you heard is not what they were trying to say. It's not the point they were trying to make. And how wonderful is that when they can get that on the table and clarify before you go on to the next step? So the next step is stating the desired outcome. So you have each party state their desired outcome, not just state their solution, but what are they trying to achieve with that solution? Because oftentimes they're trying to achieve the same thing, they're just going at it differently. So this way you can look for different or for common ground, and you can also look to see if there is no common ground, because that also gives you information where whatever solution you come up with is going to have to meet both of those objectives. So that is a really, really effective thing to do. And then finally, you try and agree on a solution within the meeting. But if you can't, then one good thing to do is immediately set a meeting to reconvene. Right, you set a time to reconvene because you don't want to avoid this. You want to make sure that this moves on, getting that solution together. But send them away with homework, and that each party needs to come back with a proposed solution that speaks to the other party's desired outcome. So it can also speak to theirs. It should also speak to their solution, but the solution should also speak to what the other party is trying to achieve as well. And what you're doing there is then having everyone take ownership of collaboration. So here's some conflict takeaways. Denise is putting in the chat the assessment that you can use to find out what kind of styles are your go-to. And if you're curious, I came up with a tie of collaborating owl and compromising fox, and accommodating teddy bear came in second. The reason conflict resolution is important is that managers spend 6 hours a week on average, 15% of your time managing staff conflict. And if you're not a manager, this also affects you, right? Because if there's conflict on your team, whether again it's directly affecting you or it's your colleagues that are being affected, it makes a difference in your day and in your week. So if all of us can get better at our conflict resolution skills and understanding the different styles and the different approaches and when to use what, research has shown that this is improving teamwork. It makes better working relationships, less stress, absenteeism and turnover rates decline. And the best thing about it is you will start to see your team become more collaborative and more solution oriented. And when you work on a solution oriented collaborative team, it is magic. And going to work is a complete joy. So, with that, I am going to hand the reins over to Craig, who is going to talk to us about leadership and motivating our stakeholders.
Great. How are you, everybody? I wanted to first talk a little bit about our district team and environment. So we are in a small school district of about 750 students, 2 schools. So we have a small IT team of about 3 people. So I just wanted to give that context for our project management journey. It works with much smaller teams too. And as Hope and Nancy mentioned too, the communication involved in project management and the conflict all are under your scope of leadership as well. And today I'm going to talk about leadership and motivating your stakeholders and knowing their aspirations. So I'm going to start off with a quote. It's by John Kenneth Galbraith. It is, all of the great leaders have had one characteristic in common. It was the willingness to confront unequivocally the major anxiety of their people and their time. This and not much else is the essence of true leadership. So I really like his highlight of easing anxiety in his team, and as a leader, knowing what those pain points are and what those anxiety points are, and really focusing on how to remove those barriers for your team. And as they talked about, Kirby talked a little bit about change management in his opening session this morning. And every project that you are doing is bringing change to your team. A change of a process, a change of a project. And so it's really important as you're, undergoing project management, you can think about some of these change management factors too. And so I'm going to be talking about the Lippitt-Noster model. It came about in the 90s and 2000s, and it's a model for change management. And the idea is in each change project or project management situation, there are 5 elements that need to be addressed in order for the project to be as successful as possible. So those elements are vision. Do all your stakeholders know why you're doing this project and why is it important? Does everybody have that buy-in? The next section or element is skills. Does your team or your department or your school have the skills required to carry out this project? And if not, can you get training or can you outsource? And can that be from a trusted, reliable source? 3, we're talking about incentives. What's in it for me? I know a lot of times in public education, monetary compensation is not on the table, but there are other things you can focus on. Can you build up your resume or your job skill tool belt? Can it make your world or your life easier? Can it, let's go for altruism. Can it improve the lives of students and staff? So that's something to think about with your project as well. Next, we're talking about resources, and I like to think of time and money as our biggest resource and allocation. Do you have those identified? And do you have ample time and money and budget in order to complete your project? And then finally, the action plan, and this goes a lot of time in your project plan. Does your team understand and know who's doing what and what steps are responsible for bringing out this change? And the Lippitt-Noster model says that if all of these elements are addressed within your team, then you will most likely experience success in your project. If an element is missing, then you might not be successful. It might fall apart, or it might not be as successful as you thought. So I'll take you for a first example. If you have all of the elements that are involved, but you're missing an action plan, you might have a lot of false starts. So you might have 2 team members doing the same task, or your team might not know what to do. So it might take you a lot longer, or it might be paused forever. So I had an example of this. Our team was working on changing our standards-based report cards for our students and our teachers. And we got together, we talked about former report card, what needs to be in place, what needs to be in place technology-wise. And we were going along, and then we hit December, and we're like, you know what, we need to have a new report card in May. And we're really missing the ball because we didn't have a project plan of like, this is what we're doing each month. And so we really had to hurry and hustle to get it done. But it caused a lot of false starts at the beginning of the project. So the next example is what happens if your resources, if that time and money is missing, you're going to be frustrated. You can't you can't operate, you can't be expected to complete a successful project if you don't have the time and money that's needed for it. Next, what happens if those incentives are missing? What happens if somebody says, well, what's in it for me? Nothing's in it for me. Then you're going to get a lot of resistance. So that one's really, really important with a project to think of it from all of your stakeholders. What is the incentive for them to be a part of that project and be a part of it successfully? Next is what happens if the skills are missing that are required for a project. We kind of ran into this. We were moving our MDF and modernizing a school from one part of campus to another. And we had consultants and contractors working on that project. And it really wasn't fully communicated to us till the end that we had a role in that move as well. We were under the impression that they would take it to 100% completion, and they handed it to us about 95% done and said, go for it. Well, we're a team of 3. We don't really have a lot of experience building a new server room from scratch. So there's a lot of anxiety in our team in that. We found some trusted partners to help us get through that, but it caused a lot of anxiety for us. And then last, what happens if you do not have a shared vision in your project? People don't know the why of what they're doing. You're gonna have a lot of confusion. Why are we doing this? Why is it important? Something to think about is all of the different stages that we've talked about in this conference really play into meeting these Lippitt-Noster elements. So example, you're casting your vision when you're doing your project charter. When you are developing your communication plan, you're developing strategies for sharing your vision of the project with all your stakeholders. With your kickoff meeting, you're really bringing everybody involved and telling them your why. And then finally, for your status reports, you're again casting, why is this important? Where are we going? Same thing with your skills. The skills needed are allocated in your project charter, and your planning and execution phase, you are either planning how you're building those skills or where you're receiving those from. And so as you can look at the rest of this chart, you can see that all of these Lippitt-Noster elements are involved. But one tie that binds all of them is the project charter. The project charter, if you really spend that time developing a really robust project charter, thinking of the change from all of the stakeholders involved, then the chances are you are going to have a successful project. So that's why that's really important, and really important to think about all of those potential anxiety points and think of one of those, where one of those elements of the Lippitt-Noster model might not be successful. So now I would like you guys to go ahead and share an example in the chat. If you can think about it, I'll give you a minute or two. But what's an example of a project that you worked on where one of these following elements was missing: the vision, the skills, the incentives, the resources, the action plan? And how could you have used leadership to avoid this? And I'll pull up our Lippitt-Noster model so you can see what it might cause by having that action plan or resources or incentives or skills or vision missing. Awesome. So we've had some projects where the skills and knowledge to complete the project weren't there. Yeah, it causes a lot of anxiety. I've been there. I hear you. Access control project not having the resources. Yeah, it's really difficult to secure your whole building without the budget and the resources and the time needed for that. The vision was missing. Team members may be working on different projects together. Oh my gosh, I've been there. Yeah. Why are we doing this? Why is it important? Mission action plan, most projects I'm on. Yeah, you get excited about the project. Everybody thinks they're bought in, but you haven't laid out those steps and laid out that calendar of when, and the roles of when things are going to happen. I totally understand that. Yep, resources always seem to be an issue as we take on more and more projects, and that causes frustration. Absolutely, yeah. So it's really important as us, as we're developing that, that project plan, that project charter. If we don't have the resources, then maybe we need to table that. We need to table that project for later, or we need to reshuffle some things around to get those resources. Yeah. Thank you guys for sharing and being vulnerable. I know it's important to know that every project doesn't go off swimmingly. There are always opportunities to grow, and there's always times where these elements might be missing. And like I gave you some examples of projects where things were missing, and but there are also opportunities. You can pick yourself up from that, and you can and further invest in that element to successfully carry out that project. Yeah. Perfect. So now I will pass the baton back on to Hope, and she will take any questions that you guys have for any of us.
Oh, you guys
Go ahead and write that in the
questions
chat
are for
any
you.
of us answer.
Any questions or comments? We'll take comments too. Any examples from your own? Are we seeing the benefits of having these different project charters and status meetings? Are we finally seeing maybe some benefits to that and how that can actually help you? Because I know it's frustrating. We sometimes, thank you for the thumbs up. I think sometimes we think that if we do this, and they do, they take more time, but the hope is that you're saving time maybe on the back end. Thank you, Shauna. Huge benefits. Thank you, Barbara. And again, if you do, thank you, Denise, for throwing that in. If you don't want to put it in the chat, or you don't want to come off mute and say something, you can put it in our Padlet. Any questions or comments? And again,
too.
Go ahead.
As like, it's like one thing that I've seen in the project and just through like my participation in the Project Management Academy is that a lot of times you can think about project management from like, especially when you're just starting out, like it's got to be this step and this step and this step and this template and this template and this template. And we forget the people skills that are involved. And we think that just by, completing that step in a well organized and mannered way that project is going to be successful. But ultimately in education, we're dealing with people. so if we miss that, we're going to miss the boat. Yeah.
Absolutely. I like what Drew said. It helps to have a historical record of a project. And I can speak as somebody who's just come in relatively new to my job. Not having previous documentation on a project, that even if it's a project they talked about, sometimes even if it's something that you repeat, you still want to have that project charter, right? So the example was the Office of Civil Rights data collection, right? Having that, who's involved, who should have been involved. You have all those things in your project charter. And if you come in cold and they've never done any of that and there's no documentation on that, you're floundering, right? That's going to take you more time to get up to speed than if somebody had, put that documentation for you together, and you can see, okay, I kind of see where things go, and I start seeing what the timeline should look like, all of that. It's really, really helpful to those that we used to say at another shop that I worked in with our programmers. It's like, well, I hate to say it, but if you ever get hit by a bus, we're going to be clueless here. We're not going to know what to do. Right? So we need to know. We need that documentation. So, who thought it was a good idea? Yeah, that too, Drew. Or Shauna, sorry.
I changed that analogy to when I win the lottery and move to the south of France, because I got tired of getting run over by buses.
Okay. Thank you. I like that. I like that better. So for the input, it helps lower the frustration. Absolutely. And I loved your quote, Nancy. Start by listening and listen to understand. I think that goes a long way in communication.
It really makes a difference, and people want to feel heard. I mean, people are much more likely to collaborate if they feel heard,
Yes.
even if they don't get their way. And your point of communicating even bad news is
Right.
People will come to the table, but they want to know that their concerns are being listened to, and that they can trust that you'll tell them what's going on, good or bad.
Right, good or bad. Exactly, good or bad. And I think that's a lot of times we don't communicate because it's maybe not going as well as we had hoped, right?
Yeah.
The others. Thanks, Nancy. Yes, that was a
True.
very big bus that we've been run over and continue to be run over by,
Yeah,
sadly,
big
but
buses. But it's a good point. I've been hammering home. So for those of you who don't know me, my role here at the county office is to support districts and charters with their state reporting, with CalPads in particular, which is CDE's database. And I've been trying to get them to plan out CalPads and have a timeline and have a and be able to put down the resources. And when we go to put down the resources of who is going to approve each report, to the data in each report, when I work with the district, often that's what stumps them. And I'm the point of it is, well, if you don't know who to put down in that cell, how are they supposed to know to clear their calendar and get training on the report? So that just doing that, going through the process of a charter or through the process of putting down resources in a timeline, will bring up a lot of aha moments why some projects aren't going as smoothly as they could be. Because you start realizing what you don't know, and then you work through them and plan them.
I believe there is another question regarding the historical record of a project, and it says it is important to know who thought that was a good idea or who made that change in the project.
yeah, absolutely. Document. Yeah, just that history. That's a really, really good point. I really like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Why are
And
we
why?
doing this? Yeah, why are we doing this?
Why?
Do we have to do this? Yeah. Who thought this was a good idea?
And why? Because
And why?
there probably was a very good reason at the time,
Exactly.
and it could be
Exactly.
something's changed in the meantime where now it's not necessary.
Yeah, because I don't think any of us really want to create more work for ourselves. I think we're pretty busy as a general rule. So yeah.
Danny, I see the question. Is there a chart that shows results of more than one missing component, like missing resources, incentives? I haven't seen that in my research, but I think it would be really easy to create one. I think at the beginning of a project to lay out all those elements and to make sure that they're met. I think that would be a really, really good way to start that project. To start a project. And a good activity with your team, maybe even during the kickoff meeting.
Yeah. And Kathy asked, would you suggest a project charter planning for yearly CalPads? Yes, absolutely, I would.
Absolutely. And I actually have a tool, and I'm looking for it right now, that I provide. I put it on our CalPads Connections website, and I'll put that in the chat in 1 second. And I provided a tool for end of year, where you can put down your resources and the benchmark tasks and your dependencies and all that kind of stuff. So I have one ready for you.
Nancy's got it covered, let me tell you. Nancy is very organized. So yeah, she's got a boatload of resources for you. So she does an excellent job of being very organized with them.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Okay, so this is.
If she's going to France, we better rely on it.
She's going to France. Yeah.
Oh, would that
That's
be
awesome.
So we're okay because she's organized. She's leaving us and with some good tools. So we're okay. Yes, she is absolutely. Nancy's the best.
Oh man, I'm gonna hang out with you guys more often. Good for my ego here. So that is a CalPads work plan.
Yes.
And then I'm going to also put in a plug for the CalPads Connections website. So if you have anything to do with state reporting with CalPads, this is a really good website.
Yes, Denise was just asking.
With lots of resources on it for you. So
now, Nancy, is that your link for your? Okay, no, that's the one I want. Yeah, the courses.
Yeah.
Yes, everything's there. Yes. Excellent. Okay, one more minute. Any final thoughts, comments? Thank you, Elaine.
We'll have a CalPads meeting in France. I love that.
Yeah. I vote for that. CalPads cruise. World cruise. Yeah. Thank you, Kathy. sagacity. Is that how you say that?
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. Thank
Thank
you
you
all for
all.
listening.
Yes, thank you.
Can I
Thank you for
close with the
coming.
song? Oh man.
Nancy, you're up against the minute again. We only have one more minute.
I only have a minute. I'm so sorry. There's just not time to think of a song.
Yeah.
But I hope you have a good day.
Thank
Good
you
to see you all. Thank you guys so much for coming.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.